in it. And so the Bible is clearly showing you this idea that when Jesus hung on the cross, he was showing the death and the defeat of sin, Satan, the one who had power over death, which was Lucifer, and that which represented death himself, which was the beast, the Antichrist. Now, and I know I'm moving fast, but there's a lot of information I want to cover today, and I want you to understand this. You might have to go back over and listen to this again so you truly get the depths of it. We mentioned in the last Watchman broadcast, we talked about the temple of the Antichrist. Remember, they are building a temple. They're building a pyramid on the stage. Men are coming from all the four corners of the earth, and they're running into the center point, and they're building what amounts to the temple, the body of the Antichrist himself. We know that that symbol is that of a pyramid. We covered this when we dealt with the giants. We talked about the symbol of the giants and the buildings that they built. I believe that the giants and the religion of the hybrids, half human, half God, are the only ones who could have had the technology, the strength, the power to build these huge monuments all over the earth. And if you go to Cambodia, or you go to England, or you go to Russia, or you go to Africa, or you go to Egypt, or you go to North America or South America, you have basically these temples all over the place. The mounds in North America, the temples, the pyramids in South America, they all are the same thing. These buildings, these temples are always in the form of a mound, a hill, a high place, or a pyramid. And they're named a pyramid for one reason. It's like the pagan practice of a funeral pyre. They would take these kings, and the idea was in their mind that a king is almost like a god. He has dominion over them. And when that king dies, they would take his body, put it on a raft over the sea, think about it, and they would light his body on fire so that his body would be consumed, turned into ashes, because it was the hope that this king would rise again. It was called a funeral pyre, P-Y-R-E. That's what a pyramid is. It is spirit fire. Remember, it has four sides. 1, 2, 3, 4. Principalities, powers, rulers of darkness, spiritual wickedness in high places. It is the fourth kingdom. Hence, the pyramid is the fire temple of Daniel's fourth kingdom in the book of Daniel chapter 2. It's the one that Nebuchadnezzar saw. So I want you to take this now, this idea of fire and birds. Remember, birds in the Bible represent something that could be carved out, the image of a God that people are going to worship. God talks about that in the last days He is going to have a great sacrifice. What is it that God's going to sacrifice? Well, He's already killed goats and little lambs and little animals. He sent His only Son to be the sacrifice, the lamb that was slain for the foundation of the world, for the sins of mankind. In the last days, there's going to be a great sacrifice. What is it of? It's of these fallen, evil angels. They are going to be crucified. The law was a pretext, was a prefiguring of this last day sacrifice of killing these devils. In Leviticus chapter 1, verse 17, the Bible says, "And he shall cleave it with the wings thereof." This is describing a sacrifice. But notice the wings, "but shall not divide it asunder, and the priest shall burn it upon the altar, upon the wood that is upon the fire. It is a burnt sacrifice, an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto the Lord." Isn't that amazing? In the law is a prefiguring of the ritual sacrifice of the phoenix, taking its wings and casting it upon the fire, upon the pyramid. In the back of the $1 bill, you have the fire temple, you have the pyramid, and what is it? The all-seeing eye, which is the beast, the Antichrist, Osiris, rising up out of the flames of that pyramid. That's the symbolism of it, because it represents the sacrifice of the Antichrist in the last days. Leviticus chapter 1, verse 16, notice what the Bible says, "And he shall pluck away his crop with his feathers, and cast it beside the altar on the east part, by the place of the ashes. Look at that. God is describing for you the sacrifice of the phoenix. He's going to take it and put it by the east. By the way, Masons worship facing the east. The rising of the sun. They worship that rising up of the Antichrist, the fire god in the last days. The Bible says, and he shall pluck away his crop with his feathers. His crop was the tuft of hairs that is on certain birds. When you look at the image of the phoenix, what do you see? You see the crop of feathers. What does that represent? Here's what Manly Hall says about that crop of feathers sticking out of the head of the phoenix. He says in his book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, as the phoenix was the symbol of regeneration, the tuft of feathers on the back of its head might well symbolize the activity of the pineal gland or third eye, the occult function of which was apparently well understood by the ancient priestcraft. So here we have, and we've taught about this before. We've taught about the symbolism of the pineal gland. Now, in your brain, you have this little bitty, in the very center of your brain, you have this little bitty gland, and it looks like a pine cone. So a pine cone is highly symbolic of, you'll see a pine cone in occult symbols and so on. A tree, a pine tree, an evergreen being a representative of this. So the pineal gland is called the pineal gland because it looks like a little bitty pine cone, like a little seed. And that's what a pine cone is. Let me stop right here. And this thought just occurred to me. You know how pine cones do their thing? And this is really, really interesting. Pine cones have these seeds inside of them of a new pine tree. That represents resurrection. Do you know how it is that pine cones and those seeds are able to come out of those pine cones? What is it that brings that out? This is why that every now and then it's good to have a little forest fire, because it's God's way of regenerating the forest. Because what brings those seeds out of that inner pine cone is fire. That's what releases the seed. So look at the imagery. The imagery of the seed, the corruptible seed of the Antichrist. The only thing that releases it is fire. Fire is all about transformation. Fire changes things. But it takes things from a wonderful place, a good place, into nothing but dust and ashes. Fire is just a symbol of corruption, is all it is, and destroying. So out of the ashes of the pine cone comes the new pine tree. Whew. The pineal gland. We talked about this in a video that we did called The Mystery of Contemplative Prayer. Pineal gland does pretty much one function. It has these little light sensors in it. It is like the inner eye. It sees light and darkness through the two eyes. The pineal gland controls sleep and awakening and certain moods. When your pineal gland is active, you're sort of tired, listless, on rainy days. We don't want to do anything but just lay in bed all day. That's because there's an absence of light. And the pineal gland is releasing a chemical that causes us to be very tired and causes us to want to sleep. So I want you to understand this, that when the pineal gland is activated by the absence of light, it causes sleep. That's like the sleep of death. When light comes out, the pineal gland stops working temporarily, stops releasing this chemical, and now we are awakening. So when the pineal gland is dormant, there's light and everybody's awake. When the pineal gland is activated, it's because of darkness, and it brings in sleep. Think again the contrast in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. After he's talking about the translation, he's talking about the day of the Lord coming as a thief in the night. And then the Apostle Paul says, they that sleep, sleep in the night. They that be drunken are drunken in the night. Drunken is the symbol of the ecstasy that is brought out by a lot of these rituals and so on, these activations that are taking place. But we who are of the day are awake and we're sober. And that day will not come upon us as a thief. The thief is the devil himself. That's what that's referring to. But here we have in the New Age movement, in Freemasonry, in New Age Christianity, and all of these other things, we have the concept of, oh, there's going to be a great awakening. Oh, there's going to be a light. Remember, Lucifer is darkness, but he represents an angel of light. The light of the world in the New Age movement is actually darkness. It's the exact opposite. And then because of that darkness activating our third eye or pineal gland, which the tuft of feathers on the phoenix represents, that darkness brings about what the New Age and the church and everybody else is calling, oh, we're going to have an awakening. But it's not really an awakening. You know what it is? Falling backwards and losing consciousness. It's sleep. But they call that an awakening. You see the opposites here of this. It's symbolized by the all-seeing eye. We talked about that. The all-seeing eye in the pyramid. The pyramid representing the fire, representing the temple, the body being put together so the Antichrist can live. And we have the third eye, the all-seeing eye, coming out of the fire, out of the ashes of the world. I'm going to show you this. You got to hang on to this one now. Something has to be destroyed so that this beast can rise up out of it. Somebody sent me this, and I appreciate this. When you see this, if it's you, you'll recognize the graphic you sent to me. Everybody, all these mystery religions throughout history had this idea of an inner eye, a third eye that must be awakened, must be activated. The Hindus, they have what's called the bindi, the little dot on the forehead. That represents that their third eye has been activated. Roman Catholics will put an X chromosome in ashes, right there in the same place where the third eye is. Isn't that, it's beyond interesting. It's revealing. And so the third eye represents the pineal gland. The ancient Egyptians had a symbol called the Eye of Ra, or the Eye of Horus. It literally represented the awakening and the arising of the beast from the inner being of the pineal gland. In Kundalini, the serpent is buried. He's hidden down at the base of the spine. He rises up through the 33 bones of the spinal column. There's that number 33 again. He rises up the 33rd bones, reaches the pineal gland, and activates that so that you have your third eye aroused and awakened. And somebody sent me this picture and they said, Pastor Mike, look at this. When they do a cutaway section of the middle of the brain, and right there in the center of this is that pine cone looking pineal gland. It's literally in the center point of the brain, the innermost being of man. Notice that the shape of the brain material around it looks identical to the Eye of Horus, the eyes of Ra. That is just, it's beyond accident. They are showing you the symbolism of the rising of the false god, the mythological being, the creature, the phoenix, in the last days. Now, we mentioned about this idea of the phoenix being a symbol of resurrection or rebirth or regeneration. Let's go back to some recent events that we have covered here in the Watchman video broadcast. We actually did a whole video on, you remember the miners in Chile that were trapped, and look at the symbolism here, they were buried deep underground. And they needed to be brought out. And there just so happened to be 33 of them. They were referred to as the Lost 33, in other words, or is that Spanish for the 33. And they were down in the pit, and it was very hot down in there. The first images we got of these shirtless men who had lost a lot of weight were very, very close to death because of the intense heat that they were in that cave. They'd been stuck down there for a long time. So a rescue plan was initiated. Mankind coming together, literally,